Hello and welcome to Where the Road Rises with me, your host, Eileen Curlin-Walsh. Our guest today is Dr. Robb Thompson, founder of the Family Harvest Church in Tinley Park, one of America's most influential congregations. In addition to his hugely successful ministry, Pastor Robb has written more than 30 books on such diverse subjects as renewing the mind, understanding relationships, success in business, happy marriage, excellent character, etc., etc. He travels the globe speaking to churches, government, conferences, and corporations. He has ministered in over 40 countries, and we're just delighted to have him share his stories, wisdom, and worldview with us today. Welcome, Pastor Robb.
Thank you so much, Eileen. It's such a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for the invitation. It's very, very lovely. Thanks so much.
It's been my privilege to know you, and I am just tickled pink, Pastor, that you agreed to come
you are sweet.
talk to our viewers today. So let's start with your childhood. Where were you born, Pastor? What were the circumstances?
I actually was born in Chicago. Mm-hmm. I've lived here all of my life, so I was a South Side guy of the city, and I've kind of lived around the area for all of these years, and I'm delighted about that. Mm-hmm. The circumstances of life were somewhat difficult. They were challenging, and like so many others of us that have grown up in Chicago, probably the difference of mine is that my parents were substance abusers. They were, and I mean, being Irish, you understand a lot of that my parents were both alcoholics, not just one of them. And my mom was also a drug addict before it was popular. Oh. So she was real, because they weren't designer drug users at the time. It was actually real. Love my parents dearly, and it's very difficult to discuss some of these things, but it's helpful to people, because things have turned around so greatly, and so here it was at that particular time. Dwight Eisenhower was president. The actual national inflation rate was 0.82 of 1%, and so a new home cost $9,500, and a person made $4,000 a year, and gas was 20 cents a gallon. And that was actually what was happening at the time of my birth. Throughout my very early years, I couldn't go to school because I had no clothes to wear. And I recall a time when the truant officer came up the gangway, and we could see him. Me and my brothers, we had to hide in our underpants behind the couch because it was the truant officer. And I just recall what he said to my mom, and he said, why aren't your kids in school? And she said, because they don't have any clothes to wear. And he gave her some tickets, and that was my first, my first swipe with the benevolence of the society in which we live. And so from that moment, I vowed never to be like my parents. I became them by the age of 13. And then, of course, ended up in a mental institution when I was 22. And from there is where things began to, make a difference and turn around.
And what did make the difference, Pastor? Was there a mentor? What was it? What helped you turn your life around at that point?
Well, mentors have different meanings, as you know. But let's just say that someone had made an introduction of me. I grew up like almost anyone in Chicago. I mean, if you've lived in Chicago, you have to be Catholic at least once in your life, maybe twice or three times. And so it's a beautiful section of Christendom. And they really, really are helpful in being able to give you certain disciplines of your life. But at the same time, they could not introduce me to what I needed to know. There was a deeper understanding that I needed. And so there was someone who was in the mental institution that actually told me that Jesus would take care of me if I just let him to do that. And when I had agreed to that, Jesus changed my life in less than 8 hours of time. Over 20 years of abuse in many, many ways, whether it goes from the sexual part all the way through the emotional part and the being cursed by words of people forever, that was changed all in a moment of time. And Jesus turned my life around, and by the time that I woke up the next morning, my life was completely different.
And what steps did you take after that, Pastor?
Well, actually, what it was that there were so many changes that had occurred in me that no one could even recognize that I was the same person, and continued to tell me that I would get over this thing that happened. And it's now been 42 years, and I haven't gotten over it yet. So we'll see how much longer it takes for me to get over. But I haven't. But the step-by-step process was the first thing I needed to do was I needed to be able to get the psychiatrist to release me from this mental institution. And he just told me, he said, I don't know what happened to you. He said, but something happened. Because they changed my diagnosis from ambiguous anxiety, basically bipolar, and they changed it into a deep character disorder, which they said, we can't help you. There's nothing we can do. We might be able to drug you up, and I said, I'm used to that, so it's fine. Now we just have it in an amber-colored bottle, and instead of off the street.
So, Pastor, did they characterize your faith conversion as a disorder? Or was
let's just say that at that particular time, they would say that it's not a crutch for you to be able to use in order to be able to get out of, the mental institution. Actually, they made me president of the mental institution. And what the inmates, the other patients, patients said, sometimes the inmates run the prison,
Yeah.
And so they said that, we know that you're a psychiatric student. We know it. John the Baptist lived down at the end of the hall.
Yeah.
The Virgin Mary lived next door to him, and all of the saints, Peter was there, and everything. And those were the things that people believed that they were.
Right.
And so I was told that I was not, you're not. And I said, no, I'm crazy. I said, just like you guys. I said, you guys are crazy, I'm crazy too, And so that was how I was able to get away from their anger. It was to just agree with them. But when Jesus changed my life, it not only transformed me, but it transformed everyone around me.
And when did you realize that you had a gift beyond your own conversion and your own life, but to take Jesus out into the community and build this hugely successful church that you have done?
I was backed into it. I never went forward into it. I would still have been part of Catholicism today if there was room for a person like me. And there wasn't. At the time, maybe there is now, of course, I don't know. But there wasn't at the time. And so I was asked to teach a Bible study because I spent all day, every day, just listening to things, to personal growing, having personal growth. And what ended up happening was that sometimes whatever you put inside you always has a way to come out of your mouth. And we then took this Bible study, which had 100 people in it, after 3 months. And I just said, I can't, I don't know what this is. I can't do this. I don't know what's happening here. And so people just sat there and looked at me, and they said, well, can you teach the Bible study 3 more months? So then, of course, Linda and I were attending a congregation, and we asked if, the congregation would be so kind as to be able to take this thing off our hands, because I never thought for a moment, Eileen, that I was ever really worthy enough to be able to do anything like this.
So the kind of abuse that you experienced takes a long time to heal.
Yeah. And so what ended up happening was that basically the leaders of this particular place just looked at me and said, this is after a year now, they said, we don't care what you do. We don't want anything to do with you. And as far as we're concerned, time's up. Mm-hmm. And I had a dilemma. And the dilemma was I going to let my baby die and abandon it like I had been abandoned so much in my own life? Or was I going to do something about it? So for a time, what I did was I worked my job for a number of years, and I worked for United Parcel Service at the time. And I made the decision that after I was counseling and working till 2 o'clock in the morning with people, I couldn't keep getting up at 5-something in order to go to work. Mm-hmm. It just didn't work. And I cried because I never wanted to leave my job. And so was there a mentor that introduced me into this life of following Christ? Yes, there was. Mm-hmm. But after that, sadly, the mentorships of life had abandoned me.
Fell away and you had to carve your own path.
And so there you have it.
Yeah. Now tell me, as you became immersed in your own faith and your own study, how easy was it to forgive, or were you able to forgive those who had abandoned you and who had not provided you with the childhood which we all deserve? I think, Pastor, forgiveness is such a difficult subject for all of us, mm-hmm. and we need compassion and forgiveness and mercy now because we're a very fractured society. And I'm wondering...
More than ever.
Yes.
More than ever.
Yes.
Yeah, and so forgiveness, although difficult, it was something that was somewhat easier, I think, for me, for a couple of reasons. I understood that forgiveness was always the aroma that the trampled flower cast back upon the foot that crushed it.
Beautiful.
I understood that. And the second thing I understood was I had been forgiven so much. God had forgiven me so much. How could I not forgive anyone else?
And yourself.
Well, forgiving yourself just so happens to be the most difficult person that you'll ever have to forgive.
Absolutely.
Because regret is the only pain that seems to never be healed.
And that takes a long time.
Regret, because regret has with it a realization of responsibility. And when you realize that you were not necessarily responsible at a particular place, and that there was something that you could have done, and that there were others that actually had suffered because of your lack of responsibility, that's a tougher pill to swallow.
Yes, and Pastor, I believe that healing is something all of us need to do, and we need to work on it continually. Mm-hmm. What about some of the words we hear so often associated with religion, soul, spirituality? What do those words mean to you? Do they have a specific meaning in religion, or are they all just the same thing, our source, our belief?
Well, we live we live in and although many of our viewers come from a Catholic background, what we do not understand is that we live in a post-Reformation world. And in that post-Reformation world, much of our decisions or definitions have really come from the Reformation. Now, we don't know that they came from there because we never really saw it like that, but they actually do. Mm-hmm. So, like even, let's just use the word that the Jews would use, which would be called Torah. Mm-hmm. To a Christian, that word, the exact same word would be revelation, discovery. You know, I discovered.
Yes.
But see, it's just healthy instruction. I was instructed. I learned this. It came. A light bulb turned on, and now I've moved in this particular direction, and now I'm down a path of this instruction. Mm-hmm. And so, do these words have definitions? Yes, they do. Every one of them. Spirituality. It's that there are actually two levels, and I don't want to become technical and lose our audience, but the two things that the Bible talks about: spirituality and carnality. Mm-hmm. And one would be, we call ourselves, as our society, we're Judeo-Christian. Mm-hmm. Now the other, the carnal society would really be hedonistic, which would be Greek in its foundations, where the Judeo-Christian, of course, would be Jewish in its foundations. One has more of their internal life that they examine, while the other one looks for the comfort of their external life.
That's beautiful. So I think we can all understand that.
Yeah, I think it's easy.
So that helps us truly understand spirituality versus carnality. What about body versus soul? The word soul is used so much, and I'm curious what your perspective on that word is. Or is it a very Catholic word?
No. On the contrary, it's that, the Bible talks about many different things, but the Apostle Paul, whom we all embrace, because it's by the gospel which he has shared, which is really most of what we embrace. And that he said in this letter that he had written to the Thessalonians, he said, in chapter 5 of the first letter, he said, and I pray for you, that your whole spirit, soul, and body would be preserved blameless unto the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. For faithful is he that has called you, who will also do it. And so there are people, let's just say, that you see every day, people that are what are called dichotomists. And I don't want to veer too much into this, because otherwise people kind of go, what are you talking about? The dichotomist is a two-part being. They're a soul and a body. This soul is who they are inside. But as a Christian, you really have a spirit, soul, and body. That soul is what actually gives a person life. When they die, they're lifeless. Their body's still there, but it's their spirit that actually, let's just say, their determining factor in direction. Their spirit is either alive or it is still dead. In Catholicism, we would call that original sin. To the Protestants, that would be that it's very difficult in order to make a decision for a child. Thus, the conversion rate or conversion experience does not occur until a child has let's just say, the moral aptitude to be able to make a decision to follow Christ on his own. But you can't follow Christ for someone else.
That makes perfect sense. That
yeah,
really
I mean,
does.
yeah, it's
Yes.
and it's easily understood how interdependent we really are. We're not as independent as people think. You know, we really do have these mixtures of beliefs. There are just religions that are now attempting to put America under siege. That is actually destroying the moral fiber, which Catholicism was so great at being able to bring the foundations of. You can see that, Eileen, all over the world. Wherever Catholicism is touched, the best parts of that society were when they were touched. The buildings, the infrastructures,
Education,
education,
health.
the morality, that it was where Catholicism touched.
Yeah.
And it was not until they chose independence that their societies have been in a greater challenge.
Yeah. And now, Pastor Robb, back to you. You have said that you don't want to just give a sermon, you want to be a sermon. And I find that so interesting. What does that mean to you?
I think probably for our audience, the easiest way to understand it is in something that President Kennedy had said. When he had said that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to actually live them. And so in being a sermon, I want people to be able to look at their most holy thoughts, and when they see me and the way that I've treated them and the way that I've acted toward them, that they see no difference. Because I don't want to, because I guess in our understanding is that it is easy for people to say they believe something. But a person is never what they say they believe. They are only what they do. You know, and that's what the difference is.
And indeed, that's one of my questions for you. What do you truly believe? And I think we've already established your deep faith in Christ. And is what you do a reflection of what you believe?
It is only a reflection of what I believe. And it is impossible for a person to live otherwise. It's impossible, because that very backdrop, or what most individuals would call motive, that a person lives by, that actually begins to dictate your behaviors. Because life isn't just this backdrop. It's not just this movie we're watching. Life also is a video projector. And so a person projects who they are.
Yes.
Now, if there is a deceptive scene that comes through an individual's life, they can't hold that forever. It'll come out.
Nature will come out.
Well, sure, you can't hide.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
Jesus said it like this. He said that there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. And there's nothing that's kept secret, but that'll be declared. You know?
And that brings me beautifully to my next question for you, and that is, what has being a pastor taught you about human life and the human condition?
Our need.
Our need for something greater than ourselves.
Without God, man is morally bankrupt. You know, at this time of the year, we watch movies like The Grinch or
A Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, we'll use Mr. Potter as an example. Mr. Potter is in such need of love, of being touched, and of reaching for something that's greater than himself. He became his own answer, but when George Bailey found out that without him, life would have been so horrible for others, that was when he could turn around and say, it's truly been a wonderful life.
Yes, yes.
And what did Clarence say? He said that no man is an island who has friends.
What a beautiful message.
And no man is a failure who has friends.
And everyone can understand that too. That is not a complicated
Depends
message.
on what you think friends are, but yeah, sure.
It's so simple. Tell us a great travel story. You have traveled 40 nations.
Yeah, 45,
spoken to
yeah.
So 45.
Yeah,
so I haven't been
45,
keeping
yeah,
up.
no.
So maybe tell us a great travel story, maybe a frightening one. What has going to such exotic places taught you about the land you come from?
America is the greatest place on the face of the earth.
Amen.
And you never know it until you leave here. When you see the rest of the world, the most affluent nations, their affluence only lives in where people want to take a picture of that postcard. Outside of that, they have no care for humanity. Humanity is worth less than a piece of paper or a tumbleweed that flies in the wind. When you begin to go to India, you begin to see it. As long as you stay in your compounds, you would think, this is great. But the moment that you have to leave that compound and walk 2 feet, you think, this is the most God-forsaken place I've ever seen. You can go into China. You can even go, in most places in Asia, you can look at it and you can think, why do we glorify this? And it's probably only because, everything's better if somebody else has it. I heard you mention to Tomas something about social media. We live a social media life. Everything is, what can you influence people in believing that you're happy, you have no problems, you've got a great life today. Today you're in Dublin, next week you're in London. After that you're going to Dubai. After that you're going to go spend a week in Hong Kong, and you're thinking, man, my life isn't that good. Why is my life not that good? And we live in what is being called FOMO and what they call FOLO, which is fear of missing out, fear of losing out. Other people are having so much fun. And Americans have, it would not matter to me. You could take the worst politician and put him in office, and that Judeo-Christian upbringing would dictate to him that he cannot be unkind to people.
Do you know, Pastor, when I have friends, and especially across the pond, who will complain about maybe our current administration or about the various politicians, I'm always quick to say, it's like the old democracy. It's still better than anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely.
There are some countries so crippled by their political corruption they can't function. There's no food. There's no programs. There's no health. There's no education. We still have it so good. And I'm proud to say that.
We have it on a scale that no one across the globe understands. And really, if you want to find money, you won't find money in America. America's money has been spread out to its lowest of citizens. If you want to find money, you can go into these places around the world and you will see opulence like embarrasses you. It embarrasses you. And I have the opportunity to, in many cases, to be in those situations. I'll give you just one story of one particular government that I'd spoken at. And the Queen had asked me to be able to talk to her, to talk to people who were in her administration, because they were lazy. They were just lazy. And she said, just because we have the wealthiest nation per capita in this,
Part of the world.
in this part of the world, they think that if they just lay down on the ground, that they're still the wealthiest of all. While another nation, I can't remember if it was on this particular trip, because I'll travel over there, 3 times a year or so, but where the vice president of the country, when they brought me into the office, his desire for me to speak to his administration, because they steal. So I travel the globe teaching character, honesty, integrity in corporations, because the world is in such need of just the basics of all of that, and how do you produce that, and so while at the same time I've seen the most beautiful parts of the world, but at the same time I can also say that there's no place like America.
And what would you say is at the root of the difference? Is it just poverty? Is it education? Is it Christ? What makes the difference?
I don't want to kind of portray myself as some type of Jesus freak, because a Jesus freak is only a person who loves Jesus a little more than you do. So I mean, it's just
To everyone.
That's right. That's right. To everybody outside, that guy's a Jesus freak because he loves Jesus more than me. He goes to Mass 5 times a month. I only go 4. He's too extreme. But the answer to the question, which everyone knows the answer to, it really is the gospel. America is the cradle of the gospel around the world. Sad to say, it's also the cradle of all commercialism. And because of that, much of the church world has been very commercial. It's been commercialized, and so now it competes. And so there are other parts of the world that seemingly have many more, or let's say much larger, opportunities for people to be involved in. But they're all American. You can go, and this you'll find this to be very interesting. You can go into Africa, almost any part of Africa, Eileen, and you can see things that have, there's a fellow right now that actually who is building a building for, in their auditorium, that they seat 150,000 people. And so with all of these things, the thing people need to realize that they learned everything off an American book. Because I write a book and it gets into the hands of them, and you become
Just
a legend.
replicated.
You have to go home to take out the garbage. Over there you have 12 servants that are standing outside your door every day. And you have, sad to say, you have to have people with AK-47s that protect you. But America, because of the gospel, Eileen, it's a safe place. The safest in the world.
Beautiful. What is your greatest happiness?
To see others happy.
And that's what drives you. That's very,
Because
very simple.
there's only 2 kinds of people in the world, Eileen, and one is, those who want to do what makes you happy, and then the second one is those who want you to be happy with what they do. And I want to do what helps other people be happy.
Important difference. What about a favorite poem, biblical passage, an inspirational book? Was there, other than the Bible, was there anything that was a hugely important source for you? Is there a quote you come back to? Is there a poem you loved?
There's no poem. When this had occurred to me, one of the things that I think happens because I grew up in a society of people that they were well-rounded. They were they were people who were cultured. So all of those things, whether it be the orchestra, whether it be, those were things that you saw, but those were things that rich people did. Poetry was something that individuals like that they did. But for me, I have a Bible verse that makes a difference, and that is that 2 Corinthians 5:17 says that if any man is in Christ, he is a new creature. And that can happen for any person who wants it at any time. Yeah. My vast learnings and understanding Winston Churchill, a great leader. Interestingly enough, I was actually adopted by a very wealthy Australian person in 1994. My father had already passed away, and my mom just died a year ago, and I never really wanted to, or I couldn't necessarily embrace that relationship until my parents had been out of the picture. But the thing about it is that the moment that you outgrow who you are, God will give you some other name to be able to grow into.
The teacher appears?
Oh yeah. Yeah, when the student is ready, the teacher always appears. When a child is finally at the point where they want to be a child, a parent will appear. It's one of the things that it's one of the things that I noticed in the church world, and that was that it happened in 1990 actually. I remember standing on stage, speaking, and at that moment I knew that I was no longer a minister in the lives of people. I was now a parent, because our society needs parenting more than anything else.
Good gracious. And what about you as a parent to your son, Pastor? What has been your greatest achievement in addition to your professional and spiritual success? You've had a very successful marriage. You have raised your son. What has been your greatest achievement?
My son is now, I wish my son lived here, but he doesn't. And he is now a ministry director for probably the most successful church ministry in the world. And it's global, and he's there. And I have learned how to be able to lead in my environment by a soft voice.
No need for the big stick.
Yeah.
We can do more with a soft voice.
Well, because it's a soft voice that will break someone's resistance. It's not a hard one.
Lovely. And does everything make sense now, or are there still some things in life a mystery to you?
More are a mystery now than before. I thought that I could answer them before. When you begin in life, you think you know everything. But as time goes on, you find out how minuscule you really are in the scheme of all things.
And we will live and die in mystery. There's only so much we can learn.
I mean, you are a brilliant woman. And with as much as you know, I'm sure that as soon as you open up another door, because you think you know what's behind it, and you find this vast, this frontier that you've never touched before, and you think, my goodness, how can,
Pastor.
How can I know that?
I'm fond of saying the top of every mountain is the bottom of another one. No resting in your laurels. You just keep learning and growing and achieving, and when it's in you, there's no stopping it. You just I hope to help as many people along the way. That's why we do this show. And one of the reasons we have this show, Pastor, one of our focuses and our audience are caregivers. We have so many people who care for their elderly parents, a kneeling spouse. They may still have dependent children. They're trying to keep a marriage alive. They are somewhere in there trying to keep their frazzled self human, healthy. Maybe what advice would you give to those people in our audience that are just finding it hard to struggle? I know you've written on character and you've written on not worrying and laying down your burdens. What would your pearl be for our caregivers?
Never stop caring. Never allow anything to become common. But let every day be fresh. Let your love every day be new. Look at your situation as though it were the first day that you ever faced it. Not after years. Because in time, circumstances have the power to wear you down, to steal your joy and your motivation. But joy must be the attitude that is chosen long before you know the outcome of your circumstances. Yeah.
That's absolutely beautiful. And what I've often said to our audience is, I minister in my way to many seniors, many people who are sick, doing legal documents, getting them the care, the senior resources that they need. And the one thing I have heard over and over and over from those who did that caring all those years, spouses, parents, they have no regrets. So care every day, you will never regret it.
That's right. Live, that's the whole thing about honor. Is that my mom said to me one time, she said, "Do you love me?" I said, "Mom, I love you. I love you." She said, "But do you like me?" I said, "No, Mom. I don't like you." She said, Why? I said, "Because love is something that I give you, but like is something you give me."
Earned, right. Pastor, one last subject I wanted to touch on, and that's stories and the power of our stories. And thank you for sharing your stories. And I'm quick to say that there is tremendous power to valuing your own story, writing down your story, leaving your story as a gift for those coming after you. And what you do, and in your travels, you have seen and heard so many stories. Do you have a word for our audience on realizing that their story is just as valuable as the celebrities or the politicians, and that they have as much to teach their family and those coming after as, you know, the story teachers do?
We tend to believe that everyone knows what we know.
Yes.
But no one does. And so I have 3 words for all of you who are out there. I've just had 3 words. And those 3 words are: document your discoveries. Just document them. Journal them. I mean, Eileen, you help with that.
Yes.
With journaling and helping people and giving them a vault that they can keep their story in all the time. So thank you for all of that. I mean, what a tremendous opportunity that you're giving other people.
Thank you. And of all that I do, that's one of my proudest achievements, is to help people realize the value of their story. And do you know, Pastor Robb, I don't think we could finish on a better point than that. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
It is my pleasure, and I'm very, very grateful. And I can only tell all of your viewers what I consider concerning you. That is that you are royalty.
Oh.
And I'm grateful.
Thank you.
I'm grateful, very grateful to have met you live.
Oh, thank you, Pastor. Thank you, viewers, for watching. And we will see you next time on Where the Road Rises. Goodbye.